Welcome to the Folk School on Willow Creek, featuring University Distinguished Professor Tom Easern, singing and telling stories from the Salon on Willow Creek.
Where I've got a bed for the night, boys, and my horses need hay. I've been riding that grapevine on the hot fish highway. It's little Joe the Wrangler will wrangle nevermore. His days with the remuda, they are done. 'Twas a year ago, last April, he joined the outfit here, little Texas stray and all alone. 'Twas long late in the evening, he rode up to the herd on a little old brown pony he called Chaw. With his brogan shoes and overalls, a harder looking kid you never in your life had seen before. His saddle was a southern cack built many years ago. An OK spur on one foot I lay home. His hot roll in a cotton sack was loosely tied behind. Canteen from his saddle horn he'd slung. He said he'd had to leave his home. His daddy'd married twice, and his new ma beat him every day or two. So he saddled up old Chaw one night and he lit his shot this way. Thought he'd try and paddle now his own canoe. Said he'd try to do the best he could if we'd only give him work, though he didn't know straight up about a cow. So the boss, he cut him out a mount and kind of put him on, for he sort of liked the little strays somehow. Taught him how to herd the horses and to learn to know them well, to round them up by daylight if he could, to follow the chuck wagon and to always hitch the team, and to help the cocinero rustle wood. We'd driven to Red River and the weather had been fine. We were camped down on the south side in a bend, when a norther commenced blowing and we doubled up our guards, for it took all hands to hold the cattle then. Little Joe the Wrangler was called out with the rest. Scarcely had the kid got to the herd, when the cattle they stampeded like a hailstorm long they flew, and all of us were riding for the lead. Between streaks of lightning we could see a horse far out ahead. It was little Joe the Wrangler in the lead. He was riding the old blue rocket with his slicker above his head, trying to check the leaders in their speed. Last we got a millin' and kind of quieted down, and the extra guard back to camp did go. But one of us was missing, and we all knew at a glance 'twas our little Texas stray, poor Wrangler Joe. Next morning, just at sunup, we found where Rocket fell, down in a washout 20 feet below. Beneath his horse, smashed to a pulp, his horse had rung his knell, for a little Texas stray, poor Wrangler Joe. Now little Joe the Wrangler, he'll wrangle nevermore. Days with the remuda, they are done. 'Twas a year ago, last April, that he joined the outfit here, just a little Texas stray and all alone. Dr. Kelly, you need to borrow a hanky? Yeah?
I'm okay so far.
Okay so far. Well, we'll get to you yet. Little Joe the Wrangler, which is set to the tune of, some say it's set to the tune of Little Old Log Cabin in the Lane, and some say it's set to the tune of Little Old Sod Shanty on the Claim. I say probably the latter, by line of descent, but it doesn't matter, it's the same tune. Little Old Log Cabin in the Lane takes its, or Sod Shanty on the Claim takes its tune from Little Old Log Cabin on the Lane, and where's the song come from? Well, it comes from a fellow named N. Howard Thorpe, Jack Thorpe. He published the first true collection of cowboy ballads, songs of the Cowboys in 1908. Yeah, 1908, I believe. He beat John Lomax to the punch just a little bit. And Jack Thorpe was well known for having walked the walk a bit. That he had grown up not in the West, but back east with a fairly privileged life. He went west, began traveling around, and had a mandolin with him, and he was making the cow camps, and he worked cattle, but he also collected the songs as he went around. That's Jack Thorpe. Not long ago, some private outfit brought out this little reprint, which I use as a handy reference. And you can also find his Songs of the Cowboys, both editions, 1908 and 1921, reproduced in toto on the web.
You want to turn it so people can see it?
All right.
And hold it.
Like that?
Yeah. Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah. Songs of the Cowboys by Jack Webb. The first true classic collection of cowboy balladry. Now, Little Joe the Wrangler, he put it in his 1908 edition with no attribution. In 1921, he wrote, I wrote that one myself. He fessed up to that. And he evidently didn't attribute himself in the first one because he wanted this to be, like the anonymous ballads of the Cowboys. Well, I think his qualms were unwarranted. It's certainly a classic cowboy ballad, and it was made famous by Jules Verne Allen, who brought it to the recording industry. Now, I think John and Malvina are tuned in from Oklahoma tonight, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
They
had a question for you, too.
Well, we might as well drop it in right now.
Did you get to see the Cowboys play?
What's that got to do? Well, all right. Of course, cowboy football has to do with everything, right? Doesn't it? Yeah. No, we didn't tune in the game. It does look like, however, we're back in the same boat with no defense again. How's that? We're going to have to add a third column to the scoreboard for football scores for the Cowboys this year. There's going to be triple-digit scores at some point, maybe by both teams. We'll warn our friends from Oklahoma that not only do we have a ballad especially for them tonight, but there are more coming. I have been discovering some ballads from the Indian Territory that I think people... there is even a version of Little Joe the Wrangler. Comes from the Texas Panhandle. A guy named J.E. Gardner wrote it. Cowboy as I Have Known is his version of it. I mean, we might get to that next week, but I got some research to do on his other song on the 3C Ranch. And Malvina is probably familiar with the 3C Ranch in the Panhandle down by the Beaver River because it's on the National Register, and therefore, she practically owns everything on the National Register, right? Yeah. So, there we are.
She knows it. I hope she owns it.
Well, the song from Oklahoma Territory that I was just referring to, however, we're about to get to. Let me check this agenda here. Dr. Kelly doesn't have a copy of this, so I have to mind my own store. Yeah, Little Joe the Wrangler. Hey, you have anything to say from NDSU Press this week?
I do, but I have a question for you. You mentioned next Friday, William Braddock. Are you doing a program next Friday?
I'm not sure I thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll be shacked up in Dawson, North Dakota. I think we can't we? Will you be back to the cabin on Friday night?
Well, I don't know.
You don't know? Sometimes you work late.
So we're an hour and a half away, and there's a dinner.
Yeah.
That starts at 6.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll be back in time to do it.
When are we going out? On Friday?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this might be a tangle.
We are going to the South Central Steam Threshers event that's coming up next weekend, and I typically volunteer out at the Braddock Letterpress Museum during that weekend.
Well, it may be not logistically feasible for us to get a folk school on the air next week.
We're staying at a hunter's cabin, and we don't know what kind of logistics we have there.
We could get something out of there somehow, but will we be there, you see?
I don't know.
Or are we going to? I think we're going to have to make a call right now. Maybe no folk school.
No folk school next
No
Friday.
folk school next week. No folk school next week. Yeah.
There you go.
We just can't get it in.
But anyway, you asked me what we're doing at the press.
Yeah.
Ta-da. So this week we've been working on a manuscript that is written by some pretty high people in their career positions, like Paula Kerger, who is the president and CEO of PBS, and Antonia Gonzalez, who is a host for national tribal and public radio, Native America Calling. We're doing an anthology, and they have essays in there about what rural life is like now and some insights for what they anticipate for the future. So that's been high priority on what we've been working on this week. That's enough.
All right. I'm trying to figure out the logistics of getting through this ballad coming up, which has a lot of verses, and you know how.
But I will say, you brought this on yourself.
What's that?
Getting through this song.
Yeah, you know. What Dr. Kelly's referring to is the song that in country and western music is known as Utah Carol. It in fact originates from the Oklahoma Territory as Utah Carl. And so we'll dedicate this one to John and Melvina and anybody else from Oklahoma who's listening in. The song, of course, is known throughout the Great Plains, and then in the 20th century crosses into the recording industry. And when Marty Robbins put it on his Gunfighter album, everybody knows it. It belongs to everybody at this point. But by God, it originates in Stillwater. That's why it's coming in tonight. And it was now a couple months ago. We identified the original author and found the original text. And you know what a bugbear I am to bring those original texts back and trace them to their origins. So we're going to try to do it here. How I will manage the logistics of it, we're going to find out as we go along, I reckon. Dr. Kelly, tell us a little bit about Utah Carl.
All right, here's some provenance. Although a well-known ballad popular with country and western musicians who commonly render it as Utah Carol, the origins of Utah Carl lie in the Oklahoma Territory. They are wrapped up in the colonization of the territory by people and interests from Kansas. The author of the ballad, containing 28-line stanzas, is a young man who signed himself H. H. Hunt in the text of the work he datelined Stillwater, Oklahoma Territory, August 7, 1893. Its publication in Wichita was headlined For the Eagle and entitled Utah Carl. Thus, the composition of the ballad occurred 4 years after the Oklahoma District Land Run in April 1889 that precipitated the founding of Stillwater, and about a month prior to the Cherokee Strip, or more properly the Cherokee Outlet, Land Run of September 1893 that opened the country to the west for homesteaders. Prior to the latter opening, the Cherokee Outlet had been leased for grazing by the Cherokee Strip Livestock Association, headquartered in Caldwell, Kansas. It is unknown whether the balladeer, Harry H. Hunt, ever rode the range as a working cowboy himself. Newspaper evidence of the dissemination and currency of the ballad is scattered, but establishes that it circulated in both Kansas and Oklahoma. Standard song indexes indicate its survival long enough to be documented by song catcher John Lomax and to make its way into the recording industry in the 1920s and 1930s, being rendered by Carl T. Sprague and other artists. Marty Robbins recorded it on his Gunfighter Ballads album in 1959.
And in fact, for many years, I thought he wrote it. Too bad. I hope we're not messing up his royalties.
I doubt we are.
Well, you got some more context for the thing here. Keep going.
All right. H.H. Hunt was the son of Captain J.S. Hunt, a Civil War veteran from New York, who became an aspiring politician in Winfield, Kansas, serving as clerk of Cowley County. After 1889, the political pastures looked greener in the developing Oklahoma Territory, and so he relocated to Stillwater and won election as clerk of Payne County. He networked well as a member of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Masonic Lodge, and Old Settlers Associations. He also hired as deputy clerk his son, Harry, born in Kansas in about 1872. The only stock-raising activities by Harry that can be clearly documented are from when his father, in his capacity as clerk, sometimes sent Harry out to collect strayed livestock. Subsequent life adventures of the younger Hunt are difficult to trace. It seems likely he emigrated to California. As for the action-packed, sentimental narrative in Harry Hunt's Ballad, it may have related events with which he was familiar, or it may have been purely imaginative.
And so you ask, my little friend, why I'm silent, sad, and still, why my brow is always darkened like the darkness on a hill. Run in your pony closer, I'll tell you the tale of Utah Carl, my partner, his last ride on the trail. It's the cactus and the mescal of Mexico's fair land.
The word mescal is nonsensical, probably a corruption of mesquite. As for the reference to Mexico, it was not uncommon on the southern range to call the territory of New Mexico simply Mexico.
And the cattle roam in thousands, many a bunch and band. Is a grave without a headstone, all unmarked with date or name. There my partner sleeps in silence, there's the place from whence I came. Long we roamed the range together, for we'd ridden side by side, and I loved him like a brother, and I wept when Utah died. Side by side we rode the roundup, ropes cut out and burned the brand, and through the storm and weary darkness joined the night herd's weary stand. When the stampede comes so sudden and the cowboys form the mill.
The mill refers to the practice of turning stampeding cattle at an increasingly sharp angle until they collide and mill about, rather than racing forward. Western wordsmith Ramon Adams says, as the cattle mill in a circle, they wind themselves up into a narrowing mass, which becomes tighter and tighter until finally it is so tight they can no longer move. From Ramon F. Williams, Western Words, a dictionary of the range, cow camp, and trail, from University of Oklahoma Press, 1945.
There's a ringing voice that's silent, while Utah Carl lies cold and still. 'Twas his voice controlled the stampede as it rang out loud and clear, and the cattle, when they heard it, overcame their maddened fear. Now every boy upon the cow range knows how bravely Utah died, and they pass his grave in silence when they speak his name with pride. For he fell as a cowboy should, never blanched or quaked with fear. They saw the steers upon him, and the rush with death was near. We were rounding up one morning, and our work was almost done, when on the right the cattle started on a wild and maddened run. Then the boss's little daughter, who was riding on that side, started in to turn the cattle, and 'twas there my partner died. On the saddle of the pony which the boss's daughter sat, Utah Carl that very morning had thrown a red blanket that the saddle might be easy for Lenore, his little friend. blanket that he placed there brought my partner to his end. As Lenore rushed in her pony to the cattle on the right, that red blanket slipped from beneath her, catching in her stirrup tight. When the cowboys saw the blanket, everyone there held his breath, for now should her pony fail her, naught could save Lenore from death. There's nothing on the ranges that will cause a steer to fight half as quick as some red object when it's way within sight. When the cattle saw the blanket almost dragging on the ground, they were maddened in a moment, and they charged it in a bound. Lenore saw the threatened danger, quickly turned her pony's face, and leaning from her saddle, tried the blanket to displace. But in leaning lost her balance, fell in front of that wild-eyed. "Lie still, Lenore, I'm coming," were the words my partner cried. About 50 yards behind her, Utah Carroll came riding fast, though he little thought that moment that the ride would be his last. Many times from out the saddle he had caught the trailing rope, and out of raise Lenore at full speed was he saw his only hope. As his horse approached the maiden, sure of foot with steady bound, though he swung from out his saddle to catch the child from off the ground. As he hung from out his saddle, every cowboy held his breath, for the feat that he was trying was a feat for life and death. Was a feat for life and death. Though he swung as fast he passed her, he had caught her in his arm, and I thought he was successful and was safe from further harm. But such weight upon the cinches had never had been felt before, and the hind cinch snapped asunder, and he fell beside Lenore. And Lenore fell from her pony. She dragged the blanket down as it fell there close beside her, as she lay upon the ground. Utah Carl picked up the blanket. "Lie again, lie still again," he said, then running across the prairie, waved the blanket around his head.
The narrative of the ballad contains a seemingly fatal flaw: its focus on the red blanket. Cattle are colorblind. People maintain belief that the color red is offensive to bovine creatures because bullfighters wave a red muleta in order to incite the bulls. Actually, it is the waving motion, not the color, that is the incitement. So it should be noted that as Utah Carl runs off with the red blanket to draw the cattle away from Lenore, he waves the blanket around his head.
When he started across the prairie, every cowboy gave a cry. He had saved the boss's daughter, but they knew that he had to die. He had turned the maddened cattle from Lenore, his little friend, but now they rushed upon him, and he stopped to meet his end. He stopped to meet his end. Quickly and from out his scabbards, Utah Carl his pistols drew. He was bound to die while fighting like a cowboy, bold and true. And the pistols flashed like lightning, their points rang loud and clear. The herd still came rushing, though he dropped the leading steer. Quick the cattle were upon him, and my partner had to fall. Nevermore he'll cinch a bronco or give a cattle call. There he died upon the ranges, and it seemed most awful hard that I could not make the distance in time to save my part. When we broke into the circle on the ground, my partner lay from a dozen wounds and bruises. His young life slept away. And I knelt beside him there, and I knew his life was o'er. I heard him faintly murmur, "I'm coming, lie still, Lenore." These were Utah Carl's last words. He'd gone that endless trail, and he closed his eyes with reverence, and his face grew ashen pale. His closed life's final roundup at a master's dread command, and my tears came down in silence as I clasped my partner's hand. There's somewhere a grand bright future, so I've heard the preacher say. And I think that my young partner won't be left at that last day. And if but an unknown cowboy, he was ready there to die. And I know that my young partner is a home beyond the sky. He's got a home beyond the sky. Running your pony closer, I'll tell you the tale. Utah Carl, my partner, and his last ride on the trail. It's a keeper. That one goes into the Willow Creek song bag. Chalk it up, Dr. Kelly. Isn't that something? Have any chatty guests with us this week, Dr. K?
Well,
You've been busy?
yeah.
Me too.
But I see Leah saying hello. She'll be at Braddock News. She and her husband, Alan, have been doing lots of massive cleanup out there at the Braddock Press Museum.
Did you tell her we're bringing the dogs, right?
I didn't mention that. They had a large donation from the Borlaug family. Lots of
really?
Press equipment. I don't even know what all is out there. And I hear too that Dr. Angela Smith's public history students may be working at some point to help out with interpretation and organization out there.
We'll have to find out what they're up to.
We are very fond of Leah and Alan Burke and the Letterpress Museum. Lots of good memories out there.
I tell you something we can do. I've got a new ballad in here.
Yeah.
It's a printer's ballad.
No.
Alan may be out there with Leah.
Oh, yeah.
He's given me a little counsel on some of the lingo in the song.
Okay.
And we should sing it out there at the print shop for our crew, and we'll lay down a recording of it, just impromptu right there, and then we won't, huh? Yeah, we will. and then we'll post that next week. We won't have a folk school coming out, but that we'll have something posting, not live, but recorded from the Printing Museum at the Braddock Thrashing Grounds, Braddock, North Dakota.
Next Friday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps with dogs.
Okay. Leah, you heard it here.
Who else is with us? The B. Lanning's out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
From Stafford, and I'm going to tell her thanks for giving me a lead on the G family there. And that's a scion of the G family was the author of one of our ballads from last week. Yeah.
Well, is it jumping on into your story if we mention that one of the viewers, Ken Smith, spied something you have on your stool there?
Yeah. I don't know if Ken's got any of these in his garden.
He knew what they were.
I know Robin, of course, is an assiduous gardener.
I'll get that.
Thank you. Let's take that over here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that Martin's seen a lot worse stuff since 1980. Yeah, Ken was pointing. We're all right. Ken was pointing at these, which are ground cherries. And it's like a miniature tomatillo. It's native plant, a nightshade family. And you peel that shell off, and you're left with this little yellow marble, which is a sweet nightshade fruit. And therefore you can use them in pies and turnovers and such. Or even...
just eat them.
They're pretty nice for snacking. I like to freeze baggies of them. and then just throw them in salads in the winter like you might with cherry tomatoes. Yeah. Ground cherries, there's a little Great Plains folklore for us tonight. Did you know they appear in Willa Cather's, which novel? I'm pretty sure it's in O Pioneers.
Okay.
The pumpkin seed.
The pumpkin seed.
Yeah.
Okay.
People know that. Let's see if this. I don't think we're knocked out of 10. What else is on the agenda? Well, okay. If you haven't picked up the theme, we're killing off cowboys one by one this whole episode. First, poor little Joe the Wrangler, and then Utah Carl, and now a nameless cowboy who wants to go home and see his mother when the work's all done this fall. Well, that just had to make it into the program. Since we've had a lot of other stuff to talk about this week, I'm not going to say too much about this song, except it's another one where it's a composed ballad whom we can state the author with definite certainty. It's DJ O'Malley, who came up as a cowboy to the Montana range in the days of the open range, stayed on, became a stock detective, was all kinds of different things. And then he became a fixture at Old Settlers meetings and Stockmen's meetings in Montana well into the 20th century. And he'd show up at the meeting, and then somebody would call on O'Malley for a ballad, and he'd sing one. And they were all his own compositions. Well, this is when the work's all done this fall. I'm going to be I've got an original text from O'Malley. I'm going to be singing actually the Carl Sandburg text, which I get right out of his book. This is a reprint, American Songbag by Carl Sandburg. I've spoken of Carl Sandburg before, and the proposition that this guy was a rock star poet. Sandburg, I mean, you publish poets, and wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together, a poet will whip out a manuscript and start reading from it, right?
Or just start reciting.
Sandburg would take stage in an auditorium that seated 5,000, and it was packed standing room only. And he'd get up there and recite his poetry. And then after a while, it came down near the end of the show, there would go a murmur around as he reached behind and he pulled out his nylon string guitar and he'd plunk away, I Ride an Old Paint, or sometimes this song, When the Work's All Done this fall. Another sad one, another sad song. What key have I set this? Okay. One other thing, besides being rattled brain tonight, you probably notice I'm a pretty gravelly voiced. Angie the History Dog and I were out at the Cheyenne National Grassland last night on an adventure or misadventure when Angie barged into a hollow log going after a bird, and it turned out to be a beehive. Pretty soon she's rolling on the ground trying to knock the bees off herself, and she got stung pretty bad. But me trying to drag her out of there, they shifted to me, and I took multiple hits. And so I'm not sure how much of my incapacity tonight is bee venom and how much is Benadryl. I'm trying to keep those in balance. But here we go with When the Work's All Done this fall. A group of jolly cowboys discussing plans at ease. Says one, I'll tell you something, boys, if you will listen, please. I am an old cow puncher, and here I dress in rags. I used to be a tough one and go on great big jags. But But I have got a homeboy, the good one you all know. Although I have not seen it, it was long ago. I'm going back to Dixie once more to see them all. I'm going to see my mother when the work's all done this fall. After the roundup's over and after the shipping's done, I'm going right straight home, boys, ere all my money is gone. I've changed my ways, boys, no more will I fall. I'm going home, boys, when the work's all done this fall. When I left home, boys, my mother for me cried, begging not to go, boys, for me she would have died. My mother's heart is breaking, breaking for me, that's all. With God's help I'll see her when the work's all done this fall. That very night this cowboy went out to stand his guard. The night was dark and cloudy and storming very hard, and the cattle they got frightened and rushed in wild stampede. The cowboy tried to head 'em, riding at full speed. Riding in the darkness, so loudly did he shout, trying his best to head 'em and turn the herd about. His saddle horse did stumble and on him did fall. The poor boy won't see his mother when the work's all done this fall. His body was so mangled, the boys all thought him dead. They picked him up so gently and laid him on a bed. He opened wide his blue eyes and looking all around, he motioned to his comrades to sit near him on the ground. Boys, send my mother my wages, the wages I have earned, for I am afraid, boys, my last year I have turned. I'm going to a new range, I hear my master's call. I'll not see my mother when the work's all done this fall. Bill, you may have my saddle, George, you may take my bed. Jack may have my pistol after I am dead. Boys, think of me kindly whene'er you look upon a ball, for I'll not see my mother when the work's all done this fall. Poor Charlie was buried at sunrise, no tombstone at his head. Nothing but a little board, and this is what it said. Charlie died at daybreak, he died from a fall. The boy won't see his mother when the work's all done this fall. Group of jolly cowboys discussing plans at ease. Says, well, I'll tell you something, boys, if you will listen, please. I'm going back to Dixie once more to see them all. I'm going to see my mother when the work's all done this fall. Coming back to North Dakota for this week's calendar ballad. I don't know, this may be the season of the year when I feel most conscious of the turning of the seasons. Little Angie, the history my dog and I take to the field this time of year. The garden abundance is piling upon us here, and Dr. Kelly commences pickling, and all kinds of things are happening. Football seasons kick off. I don't see this as the end of the looming end of a year when it comes around, particularly early autumn. It's like in our part of the world, it's the best time of the year. As Snorri Thorfinnsson used to say, Lord, help us to be thankful for autumn's rare and glorious days. Something that marks up my calendar in the autumn is the fall supper tradition. Now, for those who aren't from the northern prairies, you know about various kinds of church suppers. You know about potlucks, cover dish suppers, and that sort of thing. But the fall supper is peculiarly a northern plains thing, and it reaches its height about usually the first weekend in October, but it gets going next week, and then peaks at about the first week of October, tapers off so people can settle down and get ready for Thanksgiving. Fall suppers may, in some cases, some would say unfortunately, feature lutefisk if you're in a Norwegian or a Swedish community. I can eat it once a year, but I don't necessarily go looking for it. The common plate of a fall supper will have a bird on it. It's going to be turkey. A chicken in lieu of that sometimes, chicken dishes. In the German areas of the Northern Plains, often you'll be getting sausage at a fall supper, and there are different things. And braddock, we should go to their St. Catherine's fall supper sometimes. It's dried beef gravy on toast.
Oh.
It's our thing.
I think I could eat that.
Yeah. Then a variety of things. And I'm going to speak of fall suppers. I've been thinking about this because they're in a little bit of a crisis. Now, they are commonly served by local community organizations, and among them, commonly church congregations. And you'd have a church congregation that maybe draws 40 people for a Sunday service, and they're feeding 600. You can see the problem, especially as people get a little long in the tooth. And so some fall suppers were kind of dropping off the map in the calendar there in recent years. Then came COVID. Well, of course, a complete disaster for the fall supper scene. Last year, they began to blink in, but in particular on a drive-up basis. And this year, they're coming back, but some have not come back. I think, quite honestly, it may be a case that you had a change of priest or minister during the COVID interlude, came back in, and the guy just didn't understand how important the fall supper is. It builds up the building fund because people come in and pay for the supper, and they leave a little extra cash behind for the welfare of the church.
And there's often a bazaar.
There's a bazaar, and they're selling all kinds of other stuff. Not a bar.
A bazaar.
That's after the fall supper. A bazaar, a cakewalk, all kinds of things going on there. A bingo game. Hey, that'll take in some money. Those all things often go along with the fall supper. So it's a moneymaker for a local parish that may be kind of struggling to keep a decent roof on the church. It's an internal team-building exercise every year because you're on the potato crew or you're on the gravy crew or whatever it is, and you've been on it for 20 years and you're hoping to graduate to something better. But you got to wait your place. But everybody has a role, right? You know what crew you're on with the same people, and you have to cooperate. And the third thing is, and I think most important, it's a homecoming function. People, you may sit down. Often it's in a church basis, or basement, or a parish hall, but people are seated to wait in the sanctuary. They sit them in the pews while a table opens up, a place opens up for them to go down and be seated and be served. And it's worth going up in the choir loft to look down on that scene as people who are coming in from hundreds of miles away, or maybe bought an airline ticket from another country even, and they have come in for the fall supper because they have to be there for it. And you can tell that when the people who are local and they're coming in and greeting one another, it's just, hey, here we are again. But the relatives and the old friends who come in from a distance, then people are popping up. And see, maybe this is, again, the COVID thing. You couldn't have the interactions that take place there in the aisle as people pop up out of the pews to greet the newcomers that they haven't seen in so long. And physically embrace. Get up, go up in the choir loft and look down on that. It's worth it. Well, that's the fall supper scene, and we've got to get to a couple this fall again.
Yes.
Okay.
Nancy Kelly says her church has an annual plowman's lunch.
I understand, and of course she's operating in Anglo-American tradition in her denomination, as I recollect it, Nancy. And then you're going to have, that's an English type tradition. I've got a fall supper song. It was finished yesterday. A lot of times these things are done, just before we turn the light on here. But this is the fall supper song. Let's go this key. Make sure I got everything here. Now they come from Seattle, they come from St. Paul. They all drive back home this one day in the fall. When it's fall supper time on the prairies each year, that's when all the prodigal sons will appear, singing "Tooralai, ooralai, ooralai, lie. Now pour me some coffee and cut me some pie." All the bachelor farmers are a-making the rounds, taking in the fall supper and putting on pounds. There's a hard winter coming, they need to bulk up. We do not begrudge them whatever they sup, singing "Tooralai, ooralai, ooralai, lie. Now pour me some coffee and cut me some pie." Then the locusts descend every even-numbered year. Politicians are seeking themselves to endear to the diners, but instead of just taking up space, they should make themselves useful in the kitchen someplace, singing "Tooralai, ooralai, ooralai, lie. Now pour me some coffee and cut me some pie." Now I get pretty tired mashing spuds, yes I do. Sometimes I fill in on the gravy crew too. Someday I'll be an elder, I'm longing for that. I'll sit and tell tickets and just chew the fat, singing "Tooralai, ooralai, ooralai, lie. Now pour me some coffee and cut me some pie." Some say that autumn is the end of it all. I say it's a time of renewal in fall. We can all come together at the table of grace, and we feel a lot better when we leave this place. Yes, we feel a lot better when we leave this place. They come from Seattle, they come from St. Paul. And little Joe the Wrangler, his days they are done. 'Twas a year ago he joined the outfit here, Texas straying all alone, Texas straying all alone. Pulling your pony closer, I'll tell the simple tale. You talk Carl, my partner, and his last ride on the trail. Pulling your pony closer, tell a simple tale. You talk Carl, my partner, his last ride on the trail. After the roundup's over, I'm going straight home before my money's all gone. I've changed my way, boys, I'm going home, boys, when the work's all done this fall. Discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy, all the day. Some say autumn is the end of it all. It's a time of renewal in the fall. We can all come together at the table of grace, feel a lot better in this place. That's so good, isn't it? Some say autumn is the end of it all. It's a time of renewal in together at the table of grace. Feel a lot better in this place. And the skies are not cloudy all day. Dr. Kelly.
We now conclude today's edition of the Folk School on Willow Creek. We invite you to join us again next time for a recording at 8 p.m. Central Time, maybe, for more songs and stories.